Namaste everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host kushalmehra. Today's podcast is titled Hindu Temple Freedom and Casteism. And to talk about it, I have my very dear friend Madhusudhan Gupta. आज हम in person बात करेंगे ताकि अगर हमको एक दूसरे पे गुस्सा है तो हम एक दूसरे को पटक सकें.
Thank you for having me, Kushal.
So Harsh, before we actually get into the discussion, I will lay the background of why you and I decided to have this particular podcast or this particular discussion specifically. So this is the background. Harsh had made a few tweets a while ago, or Harsh has been going back and forth on this issue for now some time, I would say. Couple of years, and I've been making my own points on this subject. I've actually had Anand has been making. So recently Harsh was on a space with Anand, and first of all, I actually commend you. That was a great space. That was a good discussion. I could not tune into the whole thing, but there were many questions over there in regards to how temple freedom should be done, what exactly it means when we talk about temple freedom. So today's discussion is inspired by temple freedom, and then there is a certain section of inside the commentary at where we have reservations about temple freedom from different points of view. Let's say one point of view might be from, let's say, a center left to far left Marxist perspective. There might be another perspective from which I would say a Hindutva free rider perspective. I'm going to use that term and explain that term today, what I mean by Hindutva free riders. And then there is a Hindutva perspective. Now, full disclosure, I don't consider myself would be entirely Hindutva because I'm not formally associated or affiliated with the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. I just am a mere voter for the Bharatiya Janata Party. And beyond that, there were a lot of perspectives around it. Now, to begin with, I want you to explain, when you talk about temple freedom, what exactly do you mean by it?
So, first of all, Kushal, it's very important for me to clarify the outset that, like most of us, I'm also thinking through these issues. So, the point is to kind of provoke discussion, if needed, debate, so that we can actually get to some kind of point of commonality and consensus and move forward.
Yeah.
I am absolutely and completely for freeing our Hindu temples.
Okay.
It's nothing new. I've written about it in my book, which came out 3 years ago. I've written about it in articles as early as 10 years ago or even earlier. So the question is not whether we should free Hindu temples, not at least from my perspective. We have to remove them from government control.
Okay.
The issue is, okay, so what does the day after look like? What does it mean to free Hindu temples? So my question, and I've discussed with multiple friends, acquaintances, online, offline, and my sense was that actually we've not really thought through it in great detail. In fact, I googled. There's only one paper which I found by I think retired Professor Ramesh G, or I'm forgetting his name, from IIM Bangalore. There's only one paper which I found which had an extensive discussion of this topic, and there also certain issues were not discussed. I'm sorry if I'm getting the name of the professor wrong, but it is an IIM Bangalore professor. So, except that one paper, I did not find any kind of systematic treatment of this issue. Now, it is important, of course, to also emphasize before we begin the discussion that if there is to be a discussion where there is the opposite point of view or a point of view that some listeners or viewers may not agree with, and if that is dismissed as, government to temple free nahi karna chahti kyunki paison ka sawal hai and this and that. So if you think, for example, the current BJP government at the center, which is, let's say, taking an ambiguous stand on this issue. In some assemblies, they have promised it. In some cases, they have not. It's never been a core issue the way, for example, 370 was, Ram Mandir has been, and now, of course, Uniform Civil Code. So it has never been a core issue. So if one's perspective is, and some friends who I respect a lot have said that basically the government doesn't want to let go of a patronage stream, etc., and resources. I think if that's the point of view, there's not much more to the discussion left. I don't subscribe to the view at all. A government which has booming tax revenues, which has done so many incredibly difficult and courageous reforms, sometimes have to roll back merely because some bureaucrat will get money. Therefore, the top leadership does not want to free Hindu temples. For this reason, I don't find it persuasive enough.
Okay.
So it's important because sometimes what ends up happening is we end up talking past each other.
Okay.
I think there are core reasons from the point of view of Hindutva which are concerning, which need to be thought about. What does it mean to free the Hindu temple? In whose control it goes? Would it have any negative repercussions? Positive to clear. We know that, for example, if required transparency is there, etc., money will be used more for Hindu causes. Money will be used less for either waste or for corruption, or sometimes even causes which are not aligned with the Hindu religion at all. I've written about that in the book with Rajiv, A New Idea of India, in chapter 3, where in some cases money even went to abattoirs. Right? Like money went for Christian and Islamic causes.
Yeah.
So extreme cases of abuse, but they're definitely there. So it should be freed. I am at least taking the current government political stand on face value in terms of sincerity.
Okay.
And so these are my two kind of starting axioms. I think if people on this particular point don't have a commonality, then maybe the rest of the discussion will sound a bit besides the point. So my question is, to begin directly then. So, okay, let us say we are freeing the Hindu temple. What does it mean? My point is, any free temple, so any non-government controlled temple, will obviously not be a for-profit entity. Right? It will be a trust of sorts. There will be trustees. There will be fiduciary trustees with the responsibility towards that trust and temple. Who will the trustees be? Some friends have said, for example, if you remove the current government nominees, then the current trustees can remain the trustees.
Okay.
Well, I mean, of course, there is one simple logistical problem that people, eventually die, and there is a question of replacing those trustees. So, unless those trustees are on an ex officio basis, that is, they are of a particular, they are in that trustee position because of virtue of a particular office, or, for example, some ex-royal, etc., which we can discuss. Otherwise, most trustees have to be replaced, right? So the question remains, how do we select or elect those trustees? And I think, so far as I know, there has been no discussion on this, because the point remains. Are we good?
Yeah. Good.
Okay, it's fine. So the trustees have to be always there, because it's very important to understand. Hindu temples historically have always been intricately associated with the state. This is even before colonialism. All Hindu temples, at least all major Hindu temples, were a recipient of some kind of royal patronage. And therefore, even if they belong to a particular path, the word sect does not really apply to dharma, but sect or panth or sampradaya, there was a certain kind of accountability or responsibility or kind of commonality with the larger Hindu society around it. I think it's only maybe now that some NRI mandirs might be there, made in UK, US, etc., where they are the large ones, I'm not talking the small ones, where they are, let's say, in a sense, fully privately controlled. And of course, the new mandirs which have been made in India and which may not be under the government control. But historically, all large mandirs were under the patronage of one or the other royal dispensation. And therefore, there was a sense of, while of course you belong to a particular panth or sampradaya, there is a certain kind of puja paddhati, a ritual you have to follow. All those things are very specific. It was nonetheless seen as a Hindu temple. The word Hindu may not have been used in that sense, but it was very much seen as the broader dharmic commons, so to speak. So now, if we want to revert, and it is right to revert, because if secularism has to mean something, there has to be a separation between state and religion, in the sense that we want to use the word religion for Hindu Dharma as a separate discussion. So it has to go to Hindus. But then who are the Hindus who will in effect be in charge of that temple, while being, in that earlier sense, responsible to the larger Hindu society around it? And of course, there is a kind of ritualistic aspect, there's an administrative aspect. I'm very clear the ritualistic aspect should not change one bit, in the sense the rituals that are performed, the specific rites, the puja paddhati that is done, that should not change.
So, but I have to come here. When you say the ritualistic aspect does not have to change, what if the ritual, the process of the ritual and the qualification criteria, one of the qualifications criteria in the ritual is birth-based lineage?
I'll come to it. I was coming to that only. Well, let us say just focus on the rituals as what is being done. to the deity in terms of oblations, in terms of sacrifices, in terms of a daily, the daily calendar of rituals, right, which is being done. आप मूर्ति को नहलाते हो, खिलाते हो, भोजन देते हो, जो भी and फिर प्रसाद आता है. So whatever that is in that particular mandir, in the particular sampradaya, that should not change. It should not be emphasized. But for example, Vishnu Jain, who I enormously respect, his father, whose work I enormously respect, in that space with Anand that you mentioned on Twitter, which of course does not get recorded. That's the point of a space. I sense that he did not understand this point, that rituals might be changed or rituals might be homogenized. That is not to be done in any case whatsoever. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. While not changing that, I'm asking genuinely with an open mind, how do we make sure that this large major temple, which now reverts to Hindu society and goes out of the Indian government or the state government's control, is in some way connected to the broader Hindu society? Because there are two major apprehensions I have. One, which you just brought into the conversation right now. One is birth-based caste, and again, people will say caste is not a Hindu word, etc. As in when jati gets mapped to varna, right? Your birth-based or hereditary system says that you belong to a particular varna, or you should belong to a particular profession or occupation or vocation, and you should marry or you should not marry while within Hinduism, etc. That sense of caste comes in. And not only should there be no stopping of Hindus' entry on the basis of caste, any aspect of the temple, including priesthood, but also contracts for prasad, etc., should not be on the basis of caste. That's number one. Number two, I'll come to number two and then I'll connect the two. The second is, I do not want in any way, with good intentions, all of us having good intentions, to incentivize any one panth or sampradaya to have an incentive to secede from larger Hindutva. And we might briefly discuss, and you might have more to say on that than me, the SGPC example historically in the last 100 years. So, and how do the two connect? I basically want to disconnect the kind of de facto link between panth and the jati that became traditional or orthodox rather in the Hindu system over centuries, if not millennia. There is no reason why a particular jati should primarily be of a particular sampradaya or vice versa. Of course, nobody is stopping anybody from entering. Whenever I say I'm against hereditary, somebody says, well, actually that was also brought up in the space by somebody, that why there will always be some extremely good lawyer or doctor who others are kind of jealous of, etc. But that's the point. A doctor's son or daughter can be a doctor, but a non-doctor's son or daughter can also be a doctor. And so therefore, when I mean hereditary, of course, colloquially we say hereditary. What we really mean is exclusively hereditary. So these being the two primary concerns I have, where if we suddenly go to a large temple which has been under government control earlier, before colonialism, was somehow interconnected to larger Hindu society through royal patronage, and most Hindu kings, even if they would patronize across panths, they might have favorites. Like Harshvardhana would, some historians now call him Buddhist, some call him Shaivite.
After all, tribal affiliations are always there in every
they get
society.
Confused is because there was always overlapping affiliations. And not to mention, just one final point for discussion with you is that even Sampradaya and Panth is very important to keep in mind. I was going through a Pew survey. More than 70% of Indian Hindus respond to not having a Sampradaya or Panth, a sect, so to speak, in mistranslated in English. This is not to say, obviously, that we, your family village, you don't have a Kul Devi or Devta, you don't have a personal favorite god or goddess, Nishta Devi Devta, you don't have Gram Devi Devta. This is also not to say that, for example, I call myself de facto Smarta. But I'm not Smarta in a traditional sense at all. I mean, I can't even enter the Smarta Matham in a certain sense, at a certain position, even if I was much younger. So, but I consider myself de facto Smarta because of the Panchayat and Puja concept, where you can worship multiple gods without negating any god while prioritizing one god, which I think is a beautiful, beautiful concept at the heart of Hinduism, according to me. The idea that one chooses to focus on one's spiritual path as opposed to negating somebody else's spiritual path, according to me, is the true essence of Dharma. So it's also important to understand a lot of common Hindus don't necessarily have kind of a specific, strong, exclusive exclusive is important. They might even have some kind of weak linkages, or they have multiple linkages to a particular panth or sampradaya. So when the common answer is, when without much thought is given, well, of course, the mandir will go back to that particular panth or sampradaya. And only people within that panth or sampradaya will take care of it. Actually, that's not so clear cut. And to the extent it's clear cut, it often ends up becoming one jati, unfortunately. So my two concerns are actually interrelated. I do not want jativad in any format in terms of whether temple entry, any other function of temple, the jati the way we discussed it. And I don't want any panth or sampradaya to be incentivized in any way whatsoever. We already have bad enough rules in terms of Article 29, 30, we can discuss separately. Already so many problems with Indian secularism, which are anti-Hindu in some fundamental ways. I don't want to add one more incentive for a new SGPC to happen. And the best way to do that conceptually is to de-link sampradaya or panth from jati. This is my primary concern, but as I said, I am open to any idea whatsoever. If it means local Hindus voting for trustees, I'm okay for that. If that is logistically too difficult, and we just form a law that not only will there be no casteism in temple entry, but even in terms of priest selection, there will be no casteism, etc. If that is good enough for now, I'm open to discussing that. I don't have any hard solutions, but I do have hard apprehensions while absolutely remaining for temple freedom. It is just that if you say it must be done tomorrow, then these two issues need to be discussed.
Okay, so let me unpack that. So first of all, to summarize what you're trying to say, if I misunderstood you, if in case if I have misunderstood you, so let me clarify this. So for you, temple freedom at a fundamental means that the state should have no role when it comes to controlling Hindu temples. They should be out of it, right?
Yes.
That is that. So
100%.
but then what if a temple decides to stay, like in the case of Karnataka, there is a temple that wants to stay inside the government control. Now, when I asked, in fact, I remember talking to Anand, and Anand, I don't know if Anand understood my question or anything of that sort, but my simple concern is that when people say freedom, what do they mean by freedom? Freedom to me is a two-way process. Freedom should not only be the freedom to stay inside the government, outside the government control, but there are many temples, say for example, they may not want to stay within the temple, they would want to stay within the temple control. Now, why is not that an equally important plank of the temple freedom movement?
I think it's a very good question. I think if my memory serves me right, I think Tamil Nadu HRC, the government body department which controls the Hindu temples there, has almost 40,000 temples, under its control or administration. And around 90% of the temples, and I'm getting this data from the IIM Bangalore data, are very small, very minimal, and or donations or land, whatever. And you're right that in many of those cases, there is a de facto cross subsidy from the larger temples to the smaller temples. And some of the smaller temple priests and other officials or employees, therefore, would want to be in the government service because they just get either more pay or more regular pay, or it's kind of a quasi-government job where they're unlikely to be fired. So there is that angle. So, which a point which I forgot to mention in my opening remarks is we could have a multi-tiered system actually. And one of the aspects of that could be, just asking, who wants to, who does not want to. And at least in terms of prioritization, a triage of sorts, we can at least, those who definitely want to leave, we can prioritize those first. So it's just important to understand this will be a messy process. There's no need formula to, you don't press a button and suddenly the government is not there, because that's just not how they have traditionally functioned in one way or the other for centuries now, not just decades in this particular format under the Indian government or in state governments of the Indian Republic. But to be completely independent, some of the more important and major temples, they've not functioned in that format. Because, of course, historically India was completely divided. We had local feudals, rajas, monarchs, etc. Even some of the Nawabs, while they were otherwise Hindu phobic, perhaps somewhere else, in some cases, they did patronize some local temples. So whoever basically assume the Indian sovereignty mantle locally, at least tried sincerely or non-sincerely to play that part of the sovereign role vis-a-vis the temple. So this is somewhat new territory, with the proviso, with the caveat there being that, of course, in US and UK we have beautiful Swami Narayan temples, etc., which is all completely. It's not like Hindus can't have large, beautiful, free Hindu temples. They absolutely can. It's just that the transition has to be thought out. Because we are talking right now not of temples per se, but temples primarily temples. That is the focus of it.
But then, see, this was one point that I could not understand in the entire temple freedom movement argument, that what if, like, it's such a simple thing, a temple should have the right to not only stay inside the government or outside, both. So that was a major flaw I have seen in the entire temple freedom argument. Now I will say, one of the things that I don't understand is, already under the constitution there are enough provisions, Harsh, which say that if you are violating
If you're for casteism, it should not be allowed.
no, like, there are untouchability rules and stuff like that, and you already have things that deal with the caste aspect, and
therefore, why is it required, and why can't we free temples? And that was a very good question that many people have asked.
yeah, so
Is that broadly? So I'll answer that. See, you're right. There's Article 15. There's Article 17. In fact, there's Article 25 2b as well. Article 25 2b, if I remember rightly, says that it should be for Hindu reforms, particularly in the case of Hindu temples and institutions, wherever they are of a public nature, they are to be thrown to Hindus of all classes. That's in the Constitution, Article 25 2b, I think. So there is an element of religious freedom. There's also an element of Hindu social reform, specifically Hindu social reform inbuilt into the Constitution, which in a very weird sort of way kind of admits that India is a Hindu Rashtra or even a Hindu Rajya in this particular sense, because the Constitution that we're talking about. So it's there. However, those words are open to interpretation. So the word untouchability, for example, is not defined. It's defined over time by case precedent, by laws, and by earlier cases setting an example. So, for example, right now, even today, when there are a lot of there's actually a lot of casteism by so-called middle castes against Dalits in Tamil Nadu in terms of temple entry. Like local, technically they might be considered backward classes, but they are locally dominant agricultural or feudal castes. And in those cases, it has been seen that, for example, at that temple being under TN HRCE, it was easier for the government state apparatus to push back against the argument that it's a private temple, because obviously under HRCU, public interest cannot de facto established. There's on the ground reality of that. But even without that, that can be established. Secondly, there are cases going on right now as we speak about Hindus, Hindu priests, for example, the case of Sabrimala, as well as the Tamil Nadu cases, which are right now in Supreme Court. There's a stay right now, where Hindu priests have said in Sabrimala, for example, some board, TDB, only Malayali, they mean it in a Jati sense, obviously not, should be made the priest in Sabrimala Mandir. Even though in many other mandirs, that's no longer the case. But Sabrimala, there seems to be some resistance. Knowledge. For example, that case is ongoing. And there are people who support freedom, quote unquote, who have on the behalf of the Orthodox position saying that actually this will pollute the spiritual energy of the mandir.
what is spiritual energy?
I don't know what spiritual energy means, because
No, but I have never understood what somebody means by, and I don't mean this in a facetious or a tongue-in-cheek manner.
no, I just want to say, in fact, Sabrimala Mandir for all mandirs, it's an Ayappa Mandir, and Ayappa is, is considered to be the child of Shiva and Vishnu in the root of Mohini, if I'm not wrong. And And on that mandir is Tatvamasi, which basically means that you are Tatvamasi, that is you, and basically it's an Advait kind of that everything is one. Imagine something as beautiful and profound as that, and yet all the ground social realities seem to be a bit more tribal. So my problem is if you suddenly now take, let's say, TDB today becomes free from the Kerala government, and TDB becomes, because TDB is an overarching trust for many temples in what used to be the Travan princely state, because Kerala has 4 5 Devaswam boards. So Kerala itself has been reorganized into one state, right? Malabar and so on and so forth. If you suddenly now remove the government control and you don't have any law requirement, there is absolutely no pressure point for this reform process, which is already under happening. It's actually in courts as we speak. That not only stops, but people who are speaking about it most loudly get to say basically now, obviously, there's nothing to be decided.
तेरी आवाज अच्छी नहीं आ रही है, तो इधर आ जा. I'm very serious. क्योंकि I've been trying to fix your voice, but पता नहीं तेरी आवाज बराबर नहीं आ रही, तो इधर आ जा.
I don't think it's a position. I think it's simply that मुझे खांसी हुई है 2-3 हफ्ते से.
हाँ, वो अभी क्या करूँ तो अभी.
So I think that's the.
So okay, but I still don't understand this fundamental problem that why would you have a reservation then in this case with the issue of casteism is because my counter to you would be, भैया देखो ऐसा है कि if there are casteist concerns, right? It's very simple. There are enough laws on the book that deal with caste-based discrimination. Then why do we need to worry about casting in the
But
first
I mean,
place?
if there are laws, this case would not be in the judiciary right now. It's not just one case. For example, in Agama run temples in Tamil Nadu, whether caste can be a criterion for priesthood or not. The Tamil Nadu government took a position it should not be. Tamil Nadu High Court or Madras High Court supported that position. There was a temporary stay on that by the Supreme Court just a few weeks or months ago. And right now, I think in a couple of weeks or so, the Supreme Court will hear that petition. These things are actually going through the judiciary right now as we speak. So there is no settled law on this. So one can take a position that, for example, no matter what the conviction, that so long as temple entry is allowed, if you restrict priesthood or other functions to particular castes, and actually, I mean, it need not be only Brahmins Vajati. For example, servitors in Jagannath Puri are from another caste as well. So it's not just one particular jati. And my proposition applies to all mandirs, irrespective of the jati. Although the mandirs historically have been served by the jati. So the problem is what you're saying. The laws will take care of it. That jurisprudence is not settled. The law, if it is there, it's not explicit on this point. And it's not hypothetical, it's not theoretical. Look, a lot of people say, what's the big deal, Harsh?
But isn't there a law that states that if you discriminate on the basis of caste, and there are untouchability laws on the books in India?
Yeah, so the question is whether this will be considered untouchability and what untouchability applies only to temple entry, etc. What is the trade-off between religious freedom versus the requirements of equality? So these are exactly the kind of discussions or arguments that are happening in the high courts of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, elsewhere, and of course Supreme Court of India as well. So this is not settled as of now. It might well be the case that it is settled in, I don't know, 4-5 years from now. As of now, today, it is not settled. End of 2023, it's not settled.
Are you sure? Because, okay, today, if somebody discriminates against someone on the basis of...
no, so the TDB has a written requirement that the Sabrimala priest can only be a Malayali Brahmin. See, at least in the case of a particular family historically, which was, taking care of the ritualistic aspects of a temple, you can make some argument that this is a tradition that's going on. In this case, it is restricted to basically Kerala Brahmins. So you could be from the North Kerala, you could be from South Kerala, your personal Ishtadev, or historically, at least earlier, your Kul Devi, there might be somebody else, but you are eligible, whereas some other Hindu is not eligible. So this to me is textbook caste discrimination, and this is officially required by TDB, and it is right now being challenged in courts. So it's not something on hearsay; it is in writing. Everything is going through the courts. So it's not clear right now that this by itself is permissible or not. That is exactly what is being adjudicated in courts as we speak.
Point number 2. Then why not just add a law that you cannot discriminate on the basis of caste? And by the way, to the live viewers, I apologize. I think I've just figured out my mic is busted. So I'm getting another mic.
Don't worry, I didn't say anything of great consequence in any
No,
case.
yeah, no, because I just that the mic is busted. I'm sorry because sometimes
I think Kushal, you're best for.
yeah, I don't like it. ये तेरी idea थी. मैं तो बोलता
I
ना
thought we
करो.
are in Mumbai, so why not do it in
No,
person?
करेंगे. But I think I've not used this.
No, on a serious note, yeah, so that part is not being decided yet. How do we go about, is this caste discrimination or not, is actually the question which is being considered right now. So there are many other aspects to it. I mean,
no, but
let's first see.
let me make the case. What if I make a law that states that any temple that discriminates on the basis of somebody's caste or birth based identity, that temple is in violation of Indian law, and the matter ends there.
Yeah, for example, in the very beginning, I said one of the ideas could be, for example, having a law, kind of omnibus law when we quote unquote free those temples, although of course it'll happen state by state in reality, is that we could simply say that no discrimination, including on temple entry, including on priesthood, including on any contracts of the temple. That could be one way to do it. That does, in principle, address my first concern, which I mentioned about casteism. It does not address my second concern, although it is a massive improvement over what is being discussed right now. The second concern was a particular panth effectively seceding from the larger Hindu dharma kind of umbrella fold. So, which of course, I mean, it's a very complex set of circumstances that happened in the case of SGPC, and there also, as we know, that the entire movement is very much has a caste element in it. That's why the CSX and their gurudwaras are separate and so on and so forth. And within Jats and Khatris, also in the Sikh religion, there is to that extent a divide, not just in religion but also in political views, especially on political views, especially in the diaspora. So there is an element of that, but you're right that if you add law to the kind of temple freedom legislation, that henceforth there has to be transparency in auditing of financial records, all these basic things that you would expect, whatever is discussed. And one of the provisions is that there should be no caste-based discrimination in temple entry, in temple contracts, in temple priesthood, while respecting all the ritualistic aspects of that particular temple and its history. I think that's a good compromise, good trade-off. I still think it does not necessarily link the temple to larger Hindu society, but it's definitely an improvement over what is being considered right now.
Okay, now let me try the new mic.
So we are doing this live, right? It's not recorded.
No, it's okay. जब ये
I think everybody's.
जब ये record होगा सभी edit out हो जाएगा. Don't worry. I hope now my mic is fixed and people can hear me properly, because I don't know what the hell happened to my mic. Everything was working fine. I don't know. So there's something wrong. I don't know what is happening, but it is what it is. Anyways, so we'll live with it. Now I have my second question now. Now there is the other concern, that what if you separate Hindu temples out and Hindu temples go out, and then SGPC happens, that something like SGPC happens and they say we are not going to allow anybody, whether they are of X month, Y month, Z month, and this is only a closed door thing in our case. Now, my libertarian argument to that is, so what? What is the problem with that?
See, the problem with libertarian arguments is very good. It applies to new institutions. You have some major mandirs. A lot of people tell me, "Oh, if you have a problem with hereditary priesthood in XYZ mandirs, why don't you start your own new mandir?" And my response to that kind of argument, because in a way that's a libertarian argument, is it not? Start a new mandir, or start a new panth, or start a new mutt, or whatever it is. And my point argument on that is, if that is true, then why was temple entry allowed for all Dalit Hindus in all temples, including existing temples? People could have stood up there and then and said, start a new mandir. हमारे existing जो प्राचीन मंदिर हैं उसमें हमारे उस समय I think they use the word Antyaj, and Gandhiji used the word Harijan, but the term the community now self uses is Dalit, so let's use that term. Technically, the term is scheduled castes. Is that they were very clear that all existing temples, the prohibition of entry or a separate path और बाहर से देखना और इक्वल तरीके से नहीं छुपाना, अगर बाकी लोग स्पर्श कर सकते हैं भगवान को, तो ये लोग सिर्फ अपने जाति के कारण स्पर्श नहीं कर सकते. All those things were outlawed. Whether or not it de facto happened on the ground immediately, it did not. But it was completely, fully, explicitly, unambiguously made illegal. And then also, Swami Karpatri Maharaj and other people kind of fought in Kashi, and they even tried to make a new Kashi Vishwanath Mandir. They failed. There's a big history there. But basically, the idea this you should start your own new mandir or leave the existing institutions aside. That does not answer the question which I've posted on social media as well. If tradition is so sacrosanct and not one aspect of tradition can be changed, then how has it that this aspect of tradition was changed, was junked? Either that was in compliance with Shastras, in which case, the true traditionalist argument, the true orthodox rather argument, should be to want a prohibition on Dalit Hindus. One should have the courage of the conviction to say that openly. If it was not in the Shastras according to your interpretation of that particular mandir, then why was it followed for centuries at the very minimum? And if it was not in the Shastras and was followed for centuries, then is it okay to say that everything was perfect with that hereditary setup and nothing should be changed? I mean, these are uncomfortable questions, and some responses I've received have said, no, आप जिस तरीके से आप पूजा करते हैं, पद्धति करते हैं और कौन करता है, that is a core concern. कौन मंदिर में घुसता है is a relatively trivial concern. My point is, fellow Hindus for centuries not being able to enter mandirs, if that is trivial for you, then, well, we have nothing more to discuss. I don't think that's trivial. So was it according to the Shastras, or was it not according to the Shastras? And if it was according to the Shastras and it has been overruled, and now you don't want that to be changed, why do you not want that to be changed? Shastras, Agamas, or that particular ritual or tradition in that particular local mandir, it may be a textual tradition, it may not be a textual tradition. But things were happening in a particular way. It got changed. You now accepted it. But you're saying don't change something else. So I always say, make a 2x2 matrix. One is Tory, Whig, and one is, let's say, Reformist and Orthodox. So Reformist and Orthodox are points of view. It's a philosophical position about how things should be. Tory and Whig, or rather Tory, let's say conservative and radical, are actually attitudes. They're not points of views. They're basically that, okay, you change ho gaya, aur change mat karo. That's a classic small c conservative view. Radical is let's change everything, sometimes even for the sake of changing. So I'm not in this attitude business. I'm trying to understand from first principle. If that can be changed, can this be changed? Is it core to the Sabrimala Mandir that only a Malayali Brahmin Jati member should be the priest or chief priest of the Mandir? If somebody else Hindu who knows all the traditions, all the rituals of that particular mandir, has full shraddha for the deity there, becomes the priest, will that be sacrificing the spiritual energy of the mandir? So I wonder, is that core or not? Because that's the key concern, that's the key question here. Because on that hinges the point of legitimacy or locus on how any religious discussion will happen in this country going forward.
My counter to that is, this is a very slippery slope. Then housing society hoti hai, there are only Jain housing societies. Then there are other kinds of housing societies. They say we will only house X person, we will only house Y person. what we are
secret
going to,
societies.
then what we are going to create laws that
See, so
the vegetarian does not want to give a house to a non-vegetarian.
see, the question, Article 25 2B of the Constitution also speaks about Hindu institutions for public character. They should be thrown open to Hindus across sections and classes. If I'm not wrong, that's the language used. Of a public character. जी आपका बहुत बड़ा घर है, आपने मंदिर बनाया हुआ है, तो वो प्राइवेट मंदिर है. Now, if it's an apartment complex and you have a mandir within the apartment complex, it's a gray area. It may not be of a public character. For example, if it is, as you gave the example of various societies. So the question is of a public character. For example, a restaurant, to use in the temporal or quote unquote secular domain, is a privately owned restaurant. But you cannot say that on the basis of caste, you are allowed to enter or not enter. You can say it's a vegetarian restaurant. You can say it also serves non-vegetarian food or it does not. You cannot say that simply because you are born in an SC community, or only if you're GC you can come, or only if you're OBC. That is not allowed. It's illegal in India. So the question is of a public character and nature is the question. It's and again, we are right now not even talking of existing large private mandirs. We're talking of existing mandirs within the government control, and we're talking of ways to remove them from government control.
I just find
So obviously anything which is under government control is of a public nature by definition.
yeah, but because this is a very slippery slope, if you ask me, because the very nature of this journey, right, is such a slippery slope that where will we draw the line is my question. Where do you draw the line? Look, my outlook is very, see, I agree with you on every part other than the solution. We've always had this decision. So my point is that if there is a temple in society that is casteist, or that is even practicing these absurd sort of practices, which I don't approve of. I will never say that this temple is a good idea, which says that there are some spiritual energies and that only Brahmins of a particular
It could be any jati. Let's not focus on it.
or Dalits of a particular
Yes,
jati,
yes.
or OBCs of a particular jati, anybody for that matter, only they can control that. I think it's a silly idea, but my point is, fine, let the idea die.
See, the problem with your argument, Kushal, and the reason I think my argument makes more sense in this particular case is your point, which I understand, presupposes the mandir does not belong to all Hindus. My point is, starting with the axiom that the mandir belongs to all Hindus, which I, even on a historical basis, as I said, they received not only donations from all Hindus who came and worshipped, but also from the local royalty, which was, of course, acting on behalf of local Hindus, right? So, if it is an existing private mandir, you can make an argument and we can discuss or debate on various nuances whether chalne do, theek hai, hone do. You know, in the free market of Hindu ideas, some will work, some will not work. But we are talking of large traditional mandirs, which, in my supposition, belong to all Hindus. Now, of course, it belongs to all devotees. Then my question then is like, आपके अंदर कोई devotee meter है, आप अंदर जाके बोलोगे कि वो devotee
Exactly.
नहीं
I mean, how do you know who a devotee
exactly
is?
so which is why for all practical purposes it belongs to all local Hindus. Now
I'll give you an example. Now, I might not be a believer, right? But I support the Ram Mandir movement. So what am I? A devotee of Ram?
Which is why I'm saying this discussion is not very helpful. One way to just, square the circle is say all local Hindus. Now that by itself is arbitrary. I totally right. Local matlab kya hai? MLA constituency, MP constituency. Should there be some national Hindu body which is not state recognized, but to be a bit naughty, just say let's say the equivalent of all India Muslim Personal Law Board. So should there be some Hindu body writ large which is not connected to the state, which has some way of being accountable to Hindu society? I can think elections is the only way I can think of.
Can I give my opinion?
Yes.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? I think what you want is that there should not be a situation where any temple says, because of an immutable characteristic defined by Indian law, a temple says you are of X gender, you are of X jati or varna, and because of that, I will not allow you inside the temple because I think you are inferior.
See, first of all, sex or gender, jati varna is separate axis of identity. I discussed that also briefly on the space. In fact, in the Sabrimala 2018 judgment, I think the only dissenting judge was Indu Malhotra.
Yes.
Being the woman, she's the only one who dissented. And actually, she says in the judgment that this judgment is taking the kind of untouchability, anti-touchability provisions of the Indian Constitution and extending it to a new area of gender and sex.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what Indu Malhotra wrote. I'm just kind of summarizing it very briefly. And I gave a temporal equivalent or analogy of that as well. For example, there's a restaurant. In a restaurant, you will not be allowed to have, say Dalits are not allowed, for example, or XYZ Hindus are not allowed.
Yeah, but then should you be?
No, absolutely. I disagree. It should not be allowed. I'm not a libertarian there. But in that same temple, and we all intuitively understand the different kind of identity axes. We have women's night. We understand that is the different kinds of identity axes. So because you mentioned caste with gender, I just wanted to clarify that because on Sabrimala, I'm okay with the tradition of requiring menstruating age women to not enter. I think that can be, for example, be discussed by the local trustees of the mandir going forward. I am not necessarily in favor of the state at large coming down on the temple saying you must change this. Do I have that opinion very strongly? Not necessarily, but I do think there's a difference between sex and caste. Sex is a biological reality. Caste is not a biological
No,
reality.
but in Indian law, both are immutable characteristics.
Yes, sure. Indian law, caste is an immutable characteristic for reasons of affirmative action. Indian law recognizes who? SC, ST, OBC, GC. ST and OBC can be non-Hindus. SCs are only of dharmic religions, and the residual or the negative list is the GC, what we colloquially call to be upper castes, so-called upper castes, and colloquially GC plus OBC are considered as savarnas, right? So there, for example, the Indian law does not recognize you are Baniya by birth, or you are Kshatriya by birth, or you are Khatri by birth, or you're Brahman by birth, or you're Kaist by birth. It recognizes general category, a residual list. So Indian law does not recognize any of these things that we are discussing in terms of who will be appointed as a priest or not. Indian law only recognizes GC. On the other end, SC. So Indian law recognizes GC and SC for the purposes of affirmative action. It is not saying that these are biological realities. It is a legal reality for some kind of reparation or some kind of remedial action for historical and present discrimination, however imperfectly done. But we understand caste is not a biological reality. Till 1500 years ago, all Indians intermixed. It's a genetic reality that around 50 generations ago, based on the paper, 50 generations ago, maybe during the late Gupta period, that this kind of endogamy congealed. But of course, sex is a biological reality. The basic unit of state policy, in my view, should be individual, but the basic unit of society is the family, right? Families, historically, traditionally, even today, by and large, are a man and a woman. Of course, there are homosexual couples. That's perfectly fine. I think I'm all for love is love, but by and large, it's a man and a woman, maybe their parents, historically the man's parents, and their children. If it's a joint family, otherwise a nuclear family. So we understand a family unit operates in a different way, and which is why we are okay with gender-based quote unquote discrimination and affirmative action. We are not okay with a different kind of cleavage of society based on caste. So it's just not me, it's Indu Malhotra who wrote that. I mean, I'm not speaking on behalf of her. I'm just giving an example that on the Sabrimala judgment, the dissent was by Indu Malhotra. And she said, let us not linearly extrapolate from caste to gender. And for example, of course, in Hindu temples, I am okay if a Hindu temple says Muslims are not allowed to enter.
But how?
No, I'm not logistically how you go through is a
But
separate.
that's also discrimination.
No. It's a Hindu temple. How it's a place of worship for Hindus. I'm fine with that, which is why I'm saying that different axes of identity, religion is different, sex is different, caste is different. I'm also okay with a Hindu temple saying.
I'm not convinced.
No, that's fine. I'm also okay with the Hindu temple.
You have to explain better.
I'm also okay with the Hindu temple saying everybody is allowed. I'm not saying Hindu temples should say Muslims and Christians are not allowed. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that Hindu temple can locally decide that Muslims and Christians are not allowed. And equally, a Hindu temple can decide that everybody is allowed or everybody is allowed up to here. That's fine. Because if you are saying you're a Muslim or a Christian, you're not a Hindu, which is fine in my view. Which is why religion is different from caste, is different from sex. Religion, by definition, we choose. Caste is something we don't choose, but it's not a biological reality. Sex, we don't choose and is a biological reality. There are three different kind of categories. So if we intermix them, there'll be category error.
Follow up. Then how do you go about with this scenario? Let's say, okay, priest should not be based on some birth-based jati system.
Yeah.
Okay. Then how do you go about deciphering qualification criteria for a priest?
See, it's a very simple thing to do. I'm glad you asked that question because whenever I say that somebody says, "Oh, Harsh wants a UPSC exam for priests," or he's okay with a 6-month trained priest. No, I'm not saying that at all. If you require the priest to literally be trained in a certain way from the age of 5, I'm okay with that as well. Which means, ho sakta hai, many people currently may not be eligible, but theoretically their children will be eligible.
I don't want to misunderstand you. So what you're saying is that the qualification criteria
Should be the same for everybody.
Yeah, sure. So, no, let me understand you better. So samajh lo ki there is a training school, right? There's a priest training school, right? It's a priest training school.
Yes.
The training school of how to teach a priest, all the rules will be decided by the school. They have complete freedom.
Let us say, yes.
Yes. The only thing where you will draw the line is that they decide on the basis of birth-based jati that you cannot enter.
That's it.
Anybody can enter, but once they enter, they have to follow the rules of the priest.
Yes.
That means a priest says कि मैं chicken खाएगा और मैं priest बनेगा और तेरे यहाँ पूजा करेगा, not allowed, right?
So even exactly.
Am I getting it right?
Absolutely. So even if it requires 30 years of that kind of sadhana, I'm okay with it. So I just want to take an extreme example. I'm not for saying anybody will just suddenly say, I want a job, मैंने 6 महीने की training करी and now I'm a priest. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay. So you have to go through the grind.
Whatever is required should be required equally for all.
Okay. No. Now I'm on board with you.
If it is 5 years, it's 5 years. If it is 2 years, it's 2 years. If it is 25 years, it's 25 years.
Okay.
So, and if it means many people in the current generation or cohort are not applicable, that's fine. I'm okay with that as well. So long as at least theoretically their children have a chance, then I can keep my head held high, tell anybody, look around, that no, there is no discrimination in our society. There is a way to do this. आप में है श्रद्धा, अगर आप में है वो विश्वास, तो आप अपने बच्चे को करवाओ अगर आपको करवाना है तो. And of course, assuming he or she wants to go through it, right? So, but to say that you're not allowed on the basis of your birth, period, I think there can be no larger injustice. And people who say this should just frankly call themselves jati activists. No? They should not call themselves Hindu activists.
Okay, so what will
There's nothing wrong in being a jati
activist and a jati activist?
A jati activist is obviously doing activism effectively on the basis of a jati. If you are saying a fellow Hindu who follows all criteria simply is not qualified on the basis of birth, I don't see how on that core issue you can then after that call yourself Hindu activist. Because you're not speaking on behalf of all Hindus. It's as simple as that. So once again I'm saying, so in the name of tradition, let us go through this very rigorously. Have things changed in the past, yes or no? Why do you think it was not core? Was it being properly followed then, or is it being properly followed now? And if it was being properly followed then according to you, and as well as properly now, which means reform can happen.
Yes.
That means reform can happen again.
Yes.
Then it has to come down on this tark, on this well-meaning argument that whether this is core to the practice of religion at large or that particular mandir.
The counter to that will be reform comes from whom? Comes from society or from big government?
No, I don't want it to come from government at all. I want it to come from society, which is precisely I'm saying it should come from these Hindu trusts.
Oh, look, we have here. Aja. Look who we have here. Aja, join the discussion. कपड़े उतारना बंद कर तू. We have Abhijit Iyer Mitra. आजा. तू join कर, मैं अपने लिए एक और mic लेके आता हूँ.
No, he can speak here.
नहीं, I'm bringing another mic यार. I'm bringing another mic. I'm bringing. अभिजीत तू तब तक बोलना शुरू कर.
किस पे बोलूं?
बोल टेम्पल फ्रीडम पे.
No, Kushal and I, we were just briefly discussing. I think we discussed for half an hour so.
Yeah. So Abhijit is also there in my house for people who are wondering.
Yes.
We just briefly discussing. थोड़ा सा camera, I think Abhijit का चेहरा नहीं आ रहा.
Yes.
So we were just discussing that I had two main concerns. I want temples to be freed, absolutely. I just don't want any caste-based discrimination. And how we go about that, I'm open to all ideas.
Yes.
In terms of entry, in terms of temple contracts, in terms of priest selection. So long as birth is not disqualification, I'm perfectly fine with whatever rigor and rituals are there. Nothing should be changed.
Yes.
And secondly, which we were going to discuss after this, as I was also I'm very concerned, and that if you quote unquote free the temple and give it to a kind of a narrow definition understanding of Panth or Sampradaya, we might have a case like SGPC.
Right.
Happening in the future because all kinds of false or wrong incentives are created.
Yes.
And I want the broader Hindu society to have some stake.
Yes.
Or at least the broader local Hindu society to have some stake. Because historically, all Hindu mandirs received royal patronage, even before colonialism.
Correct.
So even though they were very much following a particular Panth or Sampradaya and doing puja padati of particular deity, by virtue of that royal patronage and of course broader donations by the public, they were accountable to the Hindu society at large. And those royal families, which are often local small kingdoms, would patronage across panths and sampradayas.
Right.
So there was this interlinkage which remained. But now under this kind of this modern state creation process, sharpens all kinds of identities. So I'm very concerned, and I'm open to all ideas and rebuttals on this. I'm very concerned that because of this, we might end up in some way not thinking this through. If we don't have some broader Hindu say, and we give it to a narrow group out of good intentions, and at least some of them end up becoming the next version of SDGs. So those are the two broad concerns that we're discussing various aspects.
Right. So let me break this down. First of all, till about a month or two back, I was all for temples being returned to Hindus. Till I saw the kind of arguments that were coming out from a large section of that camp. Okay. Which is what? Which is that some temples need to be reserved for some communities, which is a birth-based sort of exclusion, pretty much. Now, I totally accept Shabarimala's exclusion, because that is crucial to the itihasa or the mythology, whatever you want to call it, of that particular deity. Okay,
we discussed that also briefly.
Right. Now, the problem here is you historically have a community that has a very troubled history of birth-based discrimination, which is no longer sustainable in a modern age. Okay. A lot of the arguments you see are the same as in Jim Crow America, which is separate but equal. You can't have access to this temple, we will build you a separate temple, and you can have access to that. No, it is access to the same institutions. You tell me, how is this argument not any different from segregation laws in the southern states of America? It's the same damn thing. It is the same rationale. Sure, it's dressed up in more sophisticated and nuanced legalese.
More palatable.
Because today, the way it is done in America is it's called states' rights.
Yeah.
Here it is Hindu rights. Do Hindus have a right to have their temple? Absolutely, yes. But there are some serious social concerns that need to be overridden. Now, this is much bigger than property rights. The way I see it is Hindu consolidation versus property rights. Okay. Property rights, why? Because you are asserting your property rights over a temple and saying that it needs to come back to Hindus because too much of the money is being spent by the government on different other. There are ways to overcome that. You can create an overall board which comprises different castes, whatever, to do it, where
Only
it is
Hindus.
not abused, only Hindus, where it is not abused like it very frequently is by current state governments, viciously abused by state governments, incidentally, without privatizing it completely. The second is if this happens and it forms into SGPC, which is essentially a Jat Sikh monopoly, they won't even allow anybody else to.
That's the tension he has. That's the tension you have raised.
Yes. Now, if you create that, what are you doing? We've ultimately, after something like 870 years, we have started creating a movement where a Hindu thinks about a Hindu first and is caste and whatever later. You want to fracture that movement or fractionalize it, even if it doesn't happen. You've created the fault zones for it to happen, even before it has achieved its full political legacy. It is politically dangerous, it is existentially dangerous. And I'm sorry to say this, but it's become a kind of a nuanced version of bigotry through other means.
Okay. Now, I want both of you to tackle this issue also. I'm actually happy he has joined us, which was kind of you and I had discussed. अगर अभिजीत फ्री होगा तो आएंगे और पता नहीं क्या बैड लगा साला मेरी आवाज ठीक नहीं आ रही है तुम दोनों की तो अच्छी आ रही है मतलब वहां पे अच्छी आती है यहाँ नहीं आती है so unfair. But anyway, I had to whine about that on the live stream. But
so beautiful, so elegant. It is like the wow.
Looking like a wow.
Yeah, okay, annoying, but
it is sounding like the wow.
Abhijit, shut up. On a very serious issue there. So the other day I shared the definition with both of you privately also. So I want to talk about this concept of a Hindutva free rider. Okay. Now I'm going to read the definition out for everyone so that there is absolute clarity as to what I literally mean. What is a Hindutva free rider? Because a lot of and I'll explain my entire point of view. Although for the record, I still don't agree on the temple freedom issue because I just come from a libertarian perspective. I always come from a libertarian perspective. But so I want to talk about this phenomenon of Hindutva free riders because what is happening is this entire temple freedom movement has been couched as a Hindutva movement, which it is not in my opinion.
It is completely antithetical to Hindutva.
Movement. Harsh, do you disagree?
I would not put it so strongly as Abhijit did.
Okay.
I'm still very much in favor. I would not even put it in terms of property rights because the question is kiski property. It is very much the property of Hindus only. The question is it's not the property of only one particular panth or sampradaya, which in India de facto often correlates to one jati. So it is very much, and I really liked Abhijit's idea of one kind of overarching board, which is of Hindus only, but is not the government. So that's another way of maybe not having local elections, but having some connecting tissue between various large mandirs which have now been denationalized across the country, but some connecting tissue between them. So that's in a way you are kind of formalizing the VHP RSS thing, and you can have one-time elections. My issue is how do you have legitimacy and authority for that body? Because the All India Muslim Personal Law Board was never elected. So just think through how do we legitimize that? Because I want some broader Hindu connecting tissue. I don't want the government, but I don't want it to leave it completely alone on its own path without a broader Hindu accountability or check. That's my only concern. However we do it, I'm open to ideas.
See, there are lots of ways of middle ground on this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Explain.
Okay. So one was the suggestion that I gave you. Second is it can be given back to the original owners, but a board acts as an audit. A All India Hindu Temples Board acts as an audit. It sets down minimum guidelines for access and things like that. A basic common minimum charter that all temples agree
without
to.
the government interference.
Without the government interference.
Okay, society decide करता है.
Society decides this.
जैसे हमारा धर्म संसद होता है. Something of
the
that
question is, which is similar to the first idea he gave. The question is, how do you elect that board?
And there has to be proportional representation of all sections of Hindu society.
This is a Rahul Gandhi idea. Jitni abadi, utni haq.
Well, sure. Why not?
My point is, in a way, elections is de facto that idea, right? I mean, election.
But understand, it is not haq.
Yes.
It is formulating a common minimum program.
Yeah. And minimum word is important there.
The minimum word is important out there.
Not trying to change anything.
Because being a libertarian, you want people to run their own things. But let me ask you this. If the Madurai Meenakshi temple today is privatized, do you know who the biggest stakeholder in that will be? Guess. PTR. The former finance minister of the DMK government. Parnivel Tyagarajan, who was saying
till recently he was the finance minister.
Till recently, who will say the nastiest thing about Hindus.
Yeah.
अच्छा ये छोड़ दे.
Because of the jati thing.
Because of the jati thing.
we all know, if we did an honest assessment of who sits on temple boards across the country, I'm telling you what scares me even more. This is the one argument I will give for you, that if temples are free right now, I want all the live viewers and even the listeners of this podcast who are going to listen to this later on, I want you guys to do this survey. Start looking at every single major temple board in India and then start looking at who's sitting on those temple boards. So it is going to go to the politicians when they get free.
Well, I mean, I'd not be surprised because
I hate that reality.
universities and hospitals, which are technically non-profit but de facto for-profit, are all effectively controlled by local politicians.
Yes.
So, I mean, effectively, they will be controlled by local politicians. At least the reality will be that extremely anti-Hindu politicians, or those who are not Hindus at all, at least they will be debarred. So it will be an improvement on the current status quo, which is why I think the idea of freeing Hindu temples makes a lot of sense. The question is, we need to think of the modalities. As I said in the very beginning, okay, you don't agree with anything that you, I, Abhijit say, or various aspects. What does it mean to free? You need a trust and trustees. Who will be the trustees? And even if the current trustees are there without the government appointees, they will die at some point. How will they be replaced? Will they be ex officio trustees? So even if you don't agree with anything I've said, you still need a trust. So the only because I'm getting silence on that question, I'm assuming what it means is what they consider to be the original owners. They were not owners. Basically, give it to one particular panth or jati. That's basically the argument. Because T.R. Ramesh, and I respect him for a lot of work. I disagree with him on many things. He was also there on that brief space I had with Anand. And he said on that space, and he has tweeted about it multiple times earlier, so people can verify that I was doing the Sangh's or RSS's Vatican agenda.
Acha, ye Vatican agent
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I've first of all, if I am a Vatican agent, I'm a completely an honorary agent because I'm not getting any money from them. So see, this is how the tarnishing and labeling happens. If you disagree and you have no cogent argument against it, which is it goes the whole ki bhai reformism or modernity is Christian, Hinduism is only true if it is decolonial and all of that nonsense. Basically, Mr. I don't know if it's Dr. or Mr. T.R. MHD basically told that I have a Vatican agenda, the same as RSS agenda. I told him that
hallelujah, to tu kya?
I told him I'm very happy to be the RSS spokesperson, even though I'm not. But the fact that you mentioned me in the same breath as RSS is a
badge of honor.
It's a badge of honor for me.
I will always take an RSS association as a badge of honor. ठीक है? Because I've never met nicer people. मैं बीजेपी को गाली देता हूँ, कभी तूने मेरे को RSS को गाली देते हुए देखा है? हाँ.
कभी RSS को गाली नहीं देता ये.
हाँ. Because
incredible people.
RSS serve. They don't ask, they serve.
Selflessly.
BJP asks. Therefore, I will act like मैं मालिक तू नौकर.
Accountable.
हाँ, मैं तेरे को चिल्लाएंगा. Okay. Okay. So it's that simple. Now, T.R. Ramesh is one of the nicest, most honorable people around. The problem is we very frequently believe that, our priorities are everybody else's priorities. So, for example, do I want marriage equality for homosexuals in India? Yes. Do I believe it should happen now? Yes. Can it happen now? Possibly not.
No.
Okay. And because of that, I'm not going to go around burning Modi posters and burning BJP flags. Okay. Now, we have to understand, should temples, we all agree that temples need to be in the hands of Hindus.
Absolutely.
Okay. We all agree on that. Do we agree that some temples have completely unique rituals? Like there's a temple south of 70 kilometers south of Madras, where the pujaris have to be trans people because it is crucial to the parampara of that temple.
Lovely.
I will always oppose women of a menstruating age entering Shabarimala because the god there is a brahmachari. He does not want to see. That is the mythology of Ayyappa.
It is directly relevant to that particular deity.
It is absolutely relevant.
Or that version of that deity.
On the other hand, in Kamakhya, you will celebrate the menstruation of the goddess because it is the goddess giving her bounty to the rest of the world. She is the mother of creation and she's sharing it with the rest of the world. Should that be preserved? Absolutely, yes. Do I oppose the Supreme Court setting up and saying ki no animal sacrifice at temples? Yes.
I agree.
Do I want it banned at a larger level because it should not be done for public health reasons in that thing and animal cruelty laws, etc., etc.? If it applies to all communities equally, yes.
Exactly.
But notice the thing here. if it applies to all communities equally. It can't be that I am not allowed to sacrifice, but somebody else is allowed to sacrifice in an extremely painful way, incidentally. Okay. No. The problem comes about is you're saying now and on my terms, and no dilution and on nobody else's terms. That can't happen. Because see, the problem out here is you want temples, yes. Are temples being misused? There is nothing I disagree with T.R. Ramesh on, which is that are they being abused? They're being abused horribly. You know how much the Hindu, and he lives in Madras, so he knows exactly how badly. And you know, for him, it is crucial.
And can we just say shame on the people who swindle away temple money? Sado, tumko aur kuch nahi mila, mandir ka
see,
paisa.
that is a different issue. Let's not get into that right now. But you know, the way in which the Hindu charitable endowments has been, I'm sorry to use the word, but raped by successive governments in Tamil Nadu is a scandal. So I totally understand why for T.R. Ramesh it is the most important thing. And he is absolutely right in that it needs crucial central intervention now.
But he specifically disagrees on, for example, only Malayali Brahmins must be priests of Sabrimala. Anybody who disagrees with that, he calls him a Vatican.
Look, these are points of...
So it's for his agenda, while absolutely I fully agree on these points on waste and corruption, is very much extending to orthodoxy being retained.
Right. So this is where we need to come up with a common minimum program. Because the problem out here is nobody is willing to shift and find a modus vivendi that all of us can agree on.
Yeah, it's just a good
the
rhetoric.
moment you create, yaar, vivad mat karao, samvad karao. Vivad ko samvad mein badlo.
Yeah, but how does it help when somebody calls him an RSS Vatican agent?
Let's think of it as the beginning of the process. Think of me as the local CIA, ISI agent who's peddling the Taliban agenda. Because I'm on record calling the Taliban very progressive people. I think they're the feminists of the 21st century. You know?
BCE.
So I'm very happy to be whatever I'm called. But we need to sit down. Sure, it is the Hindu way to get nasty with each other and whatever. And at the end of it, we still find a modus vivendi. Let us sit down and find a modus vivendi.
The point of this is to start the conversation.
Right.
So I think there are three core issues, and both of you explain. One core issue that I have is that I hate the idea of government controlling things. Yes. But I, at the same time, equally hate the idea, as both of you have rightly said, that ये जाति के बेस पे लोगों के साथ discrimination against people on the basis of their jati identity is just impardonable. Like, you can't accept something like this. So how do we draw the line there? Two, I want to know your views.
It's a very simple. Let me answer this one by one before you go to two. One is very simple. The argument for a sampradaya or a caste to control a temple is, this was our family deity. It is our house. Okay. I can't allow anybody off the streets of my house. I completely agree with that. Okay. But then you can't ask the caste of everybody to decide them to let them into your house. You understand? All strangers are strangers, or no strangers are strangers. You can't say, yeah, reservation, you know, you'll see it in restaurants. Management reserves the right to refuse entry.
Not on the basis of caste.
Not on the basis of caste.
It's just, mere ko nahi acha laga, I'm not going to let you
exactly.
in.
Now,
but that's not
there is
fair,
a second.
I will push back here. People refuse on the basis of eating habits.
Of dress.
Eating habits don't have to necessarily align to a caste.
But that also can...
No. So here's the thing.
If religion,
they may be correlated, it's not aligned.
This is the problem. Here again, it is a huge correlation between caste and eating habits. So, for example, in Bengal, it is the lowest castes who have the highest dietary restrictions.
Yes.
In Tamil Nadu, the highest castes have the highest dietary restrictions. Which is why when my parents got married, for example, the marriage which is in a Kalyana Mandapam and the reception in a hotel, in the marriage, because it was completely vegetarian food, all the Bengali side of the family were asking, "Arey, ye kisse lower caste se shadi kar liya hamare bacche ne?" Then when it happened in the evening in the reception, all the bloody tambrams out there were saying, "Arey, kaise lower caste se shadi kar liya? Ye sab non-veg chicken rakha hai, mutton rakha hai," kind of thing. So there is a huge correlation between dietary habits and caste. So that is also a problem. Okay. Let us be clear about that. The third issue in all of this is, You can do it on the basis of dress, which Malayali temples even today do. You have to wear a mundu and a lower wrap around. It can't be stitched, and the upper has to be exposed. For women, they have to tie something around, or you wear an angavastram,
Yeah.
which is fine, but not birth. The fifth is employment reservation. This is a mode of employment. If the priestly class is going to be a mode of employment, it has to be open to all, because you cannot have, and this is why we're pushing back on halal. Our thing against halal is it is creating a cartelized religion specific industry where employment is restricted to religion.
It's a violation of SC.
It is a violation of all kinds of acts, because that particular category should be open to everyone. You can't make it based on who is a Muslim and who is not. So what happens here is you then can't have a caste based reservation for this particular temple and say this is, it has to be open to everybody.
Okay, both.
No, see, we have to distinguish between this concept of adhikara and kartavya or daitva. In fact, if I'm not wrong, one of the earlier Shankaracharyas of Kachi Matham also said that basically the right way to understand this concept of adhikara is actually daitva. I wrote about it earlier. I was using the word kartavya, but the same concept. See, is it the idea that everybody of a particular jati must follow a certain vocational kind of life? If it is, then it is a kartavya. It's not an adhikara. If it's a kartavya, obviously it is not being followed by all jatis, not just one. By all jatis who are supposed to map to a particular varna, it's not being followed. The current COAS of the Indian Army, the last COS, are of a jati which is not supposed to historically be of a fighting jati, or not supposed to belong to Kshatriya Varna, if you are supposed to look at it from a hereditary point of view. Same in business. I'm so happy that people from all backgrounds are coming in business, and more should come. One way to expedite that is to have more judicial reforms so that more contract enforcement happens. And anyway, the new age tech sector is increasingly open to everybody de facto. De jure, it is anyway open. So the point, as he was saying, is that if it is a job kind of turf being protected, then there is a contradiction in the argument, because one part of the argument says it is such a difficult job, it is so many sacrifices are required, only Shraddha, people with Shraddha will do it. Then obviously, then if you are admitting it's a very difficult job, why are you preventing other people from entering it, other fellow Hindus? And if it is not a very difficult job, it is some kind of privilege, then again, why should prevent other Hindus from entering it?
So basically, you're saying the argument seems like heads I win, tails you lose.
Yes, I don't think actually anybody has properly thought out through the arguments. These are emotional arguments. Often, if you put it on Twitter, they'll say, "But oh, you support affirmative action in government jobs and universities." The point is that is for various historical wrongs, however imperfectly done, for a time period, for a sunset with a sunset clause. This is how we support it. You are saying they're saying only if you remove that will this go? No, because of such discrimination that we have currently affirmative action. You're getting the horse in the you're getting the horse and the cart upside down in the wrong order. So it is very important to understand that we have to think in terms of kartavya. If you're thinking in terms of kartavya, or daitva, responsibility, or duty, you would be happy if more people are wanting to do it, right? Nobody is preventing anybody, any existing priest, his or her son, to not enter the particular profession or occupation. It's only about preventing other Hindus, right? Why would you want to prevent other Hindus when you yourself are saying it requires so much rigor, so much sacrifice? That argument has never made sense to me.
Point number 2. I seem to hear this argument all the time that if temples are not freed, Hindu society will be destroyed. I constantly hear this argument made by a lot of people.
You're following the wrong people.
I follow you and Abhijit.
Ouch.
Look, I do believe that.
Oh, yaar, meri point to sun. Ek minute.
I do. It needs to go back to Hindus, which
Okay,
is why it
okay.
is imperative.
So, no, ek minute.
But the terms have to be negotiated. That's all.
No, we all three agree it has to
Yeah.
go back.
No.
Yes.
Minute. Let me explain
Yes.
my point. I also agree that temples have to be freed, and you know why I agree now? Because I live 6 months outside India now, and I see free temples,
All the
private
time.
temples, and I see the strength of Hinduism there.
Yes.
But that society and those Hindus are not like the Hindus here. When will people realize that? हम अपने आप से झूठ क्यों बोल रहे हैं? Per capita जातिवाद NRIs में is not even 1/10 of per capita जातिवाद भारतीयों में. ये fact है. क्यों हम deny कर रहे हैं?
You look at places
Maybe
like
anecdotally true, I
Suriname,
don't know.
Fiji, Guyana, they've overcome caste
है ही
completely.
नहीं यार. है ही नहीं. इसके लिए तो मैं जब वहां कास्ट बिल की बात आती है ना और ये लेजिस्लेशन की,
We oppose it.
मैं क्यों डंके, why am I fighting against that? Because I know वहां पे इतनी नहीं है ये इशू. वहां पे यार, okay, I'll give you an example. स्वामी नारायण मंदिर, रॉबिन्सविल वाला, ठीक है, स्वामी नारायण मंदिर रॉबिन्सविल वाला,
This is New Jersey.
न्यू जर्सी वाला, जिसके ऊपर वो बिना बात का अटैक
Yeah,
किया
वो
जा
fake
रहा है,
attack हुआ था.
वो जो हो रहा है. मगर boss, it is not just Swaminarayan people who come there. I have seen South Indians, I have seen North Indians like me. We are regular visitors. Every time I go for a talk at New Jersey, because now you know why I made New Jersey a talk? Like, I want to go to the mandir, yaar. I love that mandir.
You know, interestingly, 70 years ago, there was a case going on in Bombay High Court. I think, if I'm not wrong, the Swaminarayan sect was claiming to not be Hindu to prevent Dalits from entering.
Yeah.
So this shows that
how much the society has changed.
Society and individual sects and sampradayas can reform dramatically.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. What we are arguing is based on current reality, and it can change, and I hope it will change.
Yeah. So now my point of saving the sampradayas and Hinduism subject pe, listen, my biggest worry is that एक तरफ है ना, I hear a section, this same section giving an argument, it is caste that saved Hinduism. I've never understood that argument, but I will take it on face value. That because we were a casteist society or Jati Varna based society, if I want to use their word, we were saved from this multiple invasions because it created some type of an intellectual isolationism. So
there's some truth to it, but we can discuss
even
it.
If X falls, so I'll connect it to the temple freedom argument. Now, if that is your argument, then you should be the first person who should bat for big temples leaving the government and small temples staying in the government. What kind of a nonsense argument is this? How will small temples survive? You are in the state of Maharashtra. How many times have I used this particular scheme under the BJP government, not under Mahavikas Aghadi? By the way, that government destroyed that scheme. There is a scheme called the Tirthak Kshetra Fund. And every time BJP comes in power, the amount of money allocated to the Tirthak Kshetra Fund
goes
up. And every time non-BJP governments come in power in Maharashtra, the fund goes down. You want your temples to survive. I will give you another temple. I worked in the village of Charoti and Waghadi in Palghar district. Okay. Thanks to the member of parliament, Poonam Mahajan, who let me work there. She adopted those villages. There was a Mahalakshmi temple on the hilltop over there. If the government is not involved in some way or the other in facilitating that temple, I can assure you that temple will stop. अरे वो इतने छोटे से गांव के एरिया में उसकी मान्यता कहाँ है? वो शेड्यूल ट्राइब शेड्यूल कास्ट में उसकी मान्यता है. आप बोलते हो कि गवर्नमेंट को हटा दो. आप हिंदुइज्म के दुश्मनों की दोस्त हो.
See, first of all, again, as Abhijit hinted, there can be a middle path. I'm sure even some of the people who don't agree with me on caste will be okay with the smaller temples remaining in government control.
No, but these people are not, na.
I think their real interest is in larger temples. So some of them might be okay with it, whether or not they say so. I think some of them will be okay with it. I take your point. As I said initially, there is some de facto cross subsidy happening from the larger mandirs to the smaller mandirs. And smaller mandirs, it becomes effectively a guarantee of jobs, some kind of income safety. And there are almost 40,000 mandirs under Tamil Nadu HRC, as I said. Most of them are very small. Large mandirs are relatively few obviously by definition, right? So it's only 1 or 2 percentile which are very large. Top 10 percentile are somewhat large. 90% are very, very small. They can't basically run on their own resources as of today. But I, as I said, I don't have a particularly strong view on this. If those mandirs want to remain under the government control, I'm fine for that. We don't have to prioritize them right now. But let's not sidestep the main debate that the large mandirs, which are basically what we are focusing on right now, have to be freed. What are the conditions? What are the terms, as he was saying, under which they should be freed?
Harsh, the argument every time that is
I totally agree your point.
Is that we need to save Hinduism, and for saving Hinduism, we need to free temples. My counter is, then what about the small temple? That is not an important factor of Hinduism.
Historically, mandirs were areas of congregation. They were also in some ways venture capitalists. They were involved in financing. They're involved in multiple aspects of
Today they are
society.
literally just places of worship.
Society today they're not that. Today there are other.
Outside India, the temples are exactly what you're saying.
Yes, because they serve as point of congregation for the
Community
desperate.
centers.
But see, that is what they need to become.
Again,
See, community has changed from the time when when does temple construction as we know it today really start? When the deurbanization of India starts sometime around the 4th century.
possibly inspired by the Greeks. I don't know.
Well, I won't put it to the Greeks, but I think because Hinduism has never looked for external inspiration in a sense.
So relatively late.
We organically interpret it ourselves. Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, who are not mentioned in the Vedas, will automatically get
Shiva pe I will disagree.
Rudra.
yeah, but Rudra, but yeah, anyway. It develops organically. The bhakti movement develops organically out here. It all develops organically. They were developed as community centers in a sense to deurbanization, to bring community together when cities were no longer in vogue. India noticed like the Roman
Very
Empire,
interesting
like
point.
a Sasanian Empire, where massive deurbanization
Good
happened.
point.
Right now, deurbanization is fundamentally a segregated society. Okay, and they've evolved as community
As
centers
Ambedkar would say.
for a deurbanized society. We are today urbanizing. The nature of a temple fundamentally has to change. It has to keep in terms with society. You cannot have the same rituals. You accept Shiva Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma today. You do not every day worship Vayu, Indra, Varuna, etc. You accept that the religion has changed. Modern day Hinduism is not the same as Vedic Hinduism.
Or
We do
Puranic
not go
Hinduism
in,
also.
or Puranic Hinduism.
Fully.
We don't go into the forest. We do not perform
Absolutely.
ghee sacrifices to the ghee. We don't. And in those days, the Brahmin was venerated to sit in the forest and do that, while other people sat in cities and towns and did other professions.
Now, third question, and this is the key. जो मैंने तुझे बोला था
And
again.
sorry, can I add?
Yeah,
In a
sure.
way, this system is a lot like the compact between secular Jews and Orthodox Jews in Israel. The Orthodox Jews are exempted from military service and subsidized by the state so that they sit and pray for the whole of Israel throughout
And also procreate.
and procreate. And they are the ones that
Yeah.
maintain the Israeli
I would
total
love our
fertility
trad
rate.
so much more if the TFR was higher.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just had to say that.
No, but it's true. Of a TFR of 3, Israel has the highest
big contribution.
TFR. Israel is the highest TFR of any developed country of 3.
I think by far, right?
By far.
Yeah.
And it is entirely because of Orthodox Jews.
Yeah.
Okay. Which also leads to certain social problems
Yeah,
that we
that's
look
true.
at differently.
That's true.
But that is how the society was. So are you willing to give up all other professions and trades? Because let's apply this sampradaya to
I mean,
everything.
plus
then.
Orthodox Jews is not a caste. Right?
So then
People
Brahmins should
can-
not do business at all, no?
Plus Orthodox Jews is not a caste.
True.
People
But
can-
anyway, that's
yeah.
a different matter.
Yeah.
But then Brahmins should not do business.
Okay. Now I will quote a live tweet. मैं live stream से एक quote पढ़ रहा हूँ क्योंकि वो question याद है मैंने तेरे को भेजा था. This is the crux of the issue is only what I have understood from what you two are saying is the fear. I would not even use the word unknown. The fear of the unknown is wrong. The
Yeah.
fear of the known is the right word in this. What is the known? Discrimination, right? This and we know our society's bane is this discrimination, which is why even I am 70% with you guys, 30% not.
Things
with you.
are improving
But
radically,
even
but still.
within us, we don't
No, but
agree. No?
somebody
Yeah.
on the live stream has said Jaisa Deepak's line, and I want to put it on the screen because भाई अगर जैसा दीपक बोलेगा मैंने ये नहीं बोला, मैंने सिर्फ ये line पढ़ रहा हूँ. तो लिखा है कि if you want religious places to be governed using secular principles, would you be okay with secular places being governed using religious principles? First, I will give my views on this. Then you guys are free to give your views on this. Secular places are already governed using religious principles. For example, India has a Sunday holiday. It is a religious holiday.
Yes.
It's just from the Christian religion, but there are many
Originally pagan.
originally pagan. Okay. Point number 2. Your secular spots like your parliament, like your constitution, have religious motifs all over them.
Yes.
Your aircraft has Hanumanji. Your entire life has
Thank-
many things.
Thank the gods for it.
Yeah.
No airline in the world has a row number 13. Do you know that?
Oh, I didn't know this.
Not one single airline, not even communist countries'
Interesting.
airlines had Aeroflot,
Superstition.
Air Koryo does not have row 13.
Oh, I did not know this.
Even
Many buildings
Hindu,
don't. Many buildings don't have
वो मेरे
13th
को पता
floor.
है.
even Hindu Air India or Parsi Air India does not have a row 13, even though there's no inauspiciousness of 13 in our this thing. But
Please
there
don't-
is no row 13. I completely accept that secular places should and in fact are to a large extent, because 90% of our morality and ethics comes from inherited religious law. They are already ruled by
Then in
religion.
that case,
I think the word secular religious has to be defined here.
yeah.
It-
No,
it-
no. I think that this
See,
argument of
first of
overlap
all,
is facetious
second,
in my
look, this is this is exploiting a certain a French definition of secularism, which is militantly anti-religious, because they didn't want any kind of religious connotation to it. They renamed the months,
By the way, they had nationalized the churches till early 20th
Yeah.
century.
and they do all this stuff.
Catholic church.
This doesn't work in India, boss. Dharma Nirpeksh is a very different concept.
Panth Nirpeksh.
So I totally accept that secular places should be governed by religion.
No, I see religious places being governed by secular laws. Once again, I fully disagree because it presupposes that the arguments we are having are necessarily from outside of religion.
Yeah.
Within the Hindu religion, all smritis say that they are supposed to be of a particular yuga. The yuga dharma, they are time, place, person, context dependent. The Shruti, for example, does not have this notion of exclusively hereditary varna. Even the smritis, actually, I was just tweeting that today only, have this notion, Yanyavalka and Gautama, that after 5 or 7 generations, based on the occupation a family has, they jump varna from, even though the jati remains the same by definition. So this idea that this argument is outside of religion, in this case Hindu dharma, is conceding the argument. I fully disagree with that. Which is why, in the case of Sabri Mala, I am okay with menstruating women being required not to enter, but caste not being a criterion, because caste is not a biological reality, sex is a biological reality. Within the Hindu dharma, my argument stands. It's not a secular principle in this case whatsoever. First, secondly, secular versus religious, you have to understand what it means, where it ends. For example, for somebody, climate change or climate denialism or climate activism might be a religion. Religion is how you define it. There are some established religions, there could be some esoteric religions. So religion by itself, or there was a famous case in the US where a Muslim woman wanted to wear a kind of a hijab in a Benetton shop or one of those young teen clothes shops, and she eventually won in the US Supreme Court, despite the chain saying that, if you are selling clothes to young teenage clientele, you have to look a certain way. She won the case, and I actually disagree with the US Supreme Court there, understanding of secularism there, because in that case, because you see, exactly, religion and caste and sex are all different. If you are being required by the corporate policy to look a certain way for understandable and directly linked commercial purposes, then your religion has to take a backseat in that case. Then the 1964 Civil Rights Act should not apply to you under Title 13 or whatever it is. So we have to interrogate the meaning of religious and secular itself. But right now, for our purposes, within the Hindu understanding of what is Shruti, what is Smriti, what applies, what does not apply, within that argument, there is no basis whatsoever to say that jati must only map to a certain varna, and therefore people of certain jati of a certain region can only be priests of a temple.
Can this be a compromise position? Let's say somebody lives in that area and that person truly believes in the temple, and that person wants to be a pujari in that temple, because the crux is only one thing. Temple entry to chodo, it is only about temple pujari.
Temple entry has been considered out of force,
Yeah.
not out of not because dil man gaya.
And that person truly believes in this concept, and
that it should be hereditary.
No,
then
does not believe.
Achha.
No, that they want to be a pujari of that.
Pujari of that
Exactly.
temple. So the only compromise position which can lead to temple freedom is that if that person truly out of Shraddha wants to be that, he should be allowed. once he enters or she enters the temple.
Do you remember the story of Jabala?
Yeah.
The boy doesn't know who his father is. And the Rishi asks him,
Yeah.
whose son are you? And he just says, I am the son of Jabala.
Hmm.
The Rishi knows exactly what is happening. Everybody knows what is happening, and he is made into into a priest.
Yeah, because he is impressed by his honesty.
Exactly. Vishwamitra ka kya hota hai? Vishwamitra is born a Kshatriya. Okay, but he becomes a this thing. How many rishis do you have who have not been born Brahmins and they become Maharishis?
Yeah, people then say exception does not.
Exception nahi. What is?
Anyway, Mahabharata is very clear.
How do you prove Shraddha? It is you go through a rigorous. Shraddha has to have tangibility. The Shraddha to become a. There does not have to be Shraddha for entry, but there has to be Shraddha to become a priest. And the tangibility is, can you pass all the exams? Do you understand? I have set a syllabus. Can you ace that syllabus?
Can you live in a certain
You have to tangibilize Shraddha for employment purposes.
Can you live in a certain way for a long period of time?
That is the only qualifying criteria.
Yes.
Well, once you enter the place where you are trained to be a pujari of that temple, you follow all the rules of that temple.
Yes.
Once you ace the rules of the test, also is decided by that temple. The temple is free to do everything.
Yes.
The only thing that should not be allowed is that just because you are from an XYZ jati, I will not let
That's
you.
it.
Yes.
That's it, right?
That's it.
Yes.
Have I understood it?
Absolutely.
Streamlined both of you?
Correct.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, as a libertarian who is far more libertarian than both of you, I think I can compromise on this. I can compromise as long as Hindu temples are freed, because I believe, and once again I repeat, I don't like the idea of small temples being freed, but I absolutely find the idea of large temples being freed a necessity for this society. Otherwise we are in big trouble.
But understand this, with this I am on the trads kind of. You understand this? I expect a priest in the Kali temple to be sacrificing goats and eating mutton.
Of course.
I will never.
I don't think it's a trad position.
I will eat whatever and violate whatever law. But I will never.
Go there, then you can.
I will never accept a priest in a South Indian temple. In either the Madurai Meenakshi temple or Tirupati or anything, who comes anywhere within a 10-foot radius of meat. May you say nahi manunga.
No, this goes without saying. So this is, I don't think it's a trad or any position. It's a very simple position. You have to follow the rituals. You have to, in your acharam, in everything, you have to do what is required.
But it cannot be based on birth. It has to be based on behavior.
Therefore, the requirement has to be equal for everybody. You do this, you qualify.
So, achar.
Yes, exactly. That's all.
Achar, na?
Yes. आपका जो व्यवहार है, आपका जो आचार है, आपका जो conduct है.
And here is the contradiction out here. On one hand, I believe Hinduism will not survive till temples are given back to Hindus. On the other hand, Hindus also need to evolve, because it is precisely this lack of social mobility, especially when it comes to incentivizing everybody in temples and dharma raksha. Dharma raksha cannot be through exclusion. It has to be through
inclusion. I don't think, by the way, the position we are taking will be very unpopular, by the way. I think there's a very small, loud group which will oppose it. I think if the if the government actually, for example, frees temples on this basis, puts this in the omnibus law, etc., I think there will be actually Hindu society will by and large accept it. Even the Vaikom Satyagraha 100 years ago in Kerala in Travancore, actually a lot of many middle class, so-called upper caste Hindus supported it. Even Gandhi gradually changed his position on that.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of Hindus from all jatis are very commonsensical on this. So don't let a few loud voices kind of drown that out. Most Hindus want to see the temples free, and rightly so. This is one aspect which has to be taken care of.
Okay, so now I'll start taking questions from our viewers, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
Because we all have to
do
other things also. There are many mosques, churches, and gurdwaras that discriminate based on one's caste. Why should caste be a criteria? Let SC/STs build new temples. This is the whole thing, na? Ki this is
we discussed that briefly.
Ki what if Hinduism becomes like SGPC?
No. So
why would we want Hinduism
I've always
to
said,
like SGPC?
Let me answer that very directly and very specifically. Why not use this argument to say that do not allow Dalits in existing mandirs? Dalits should make their own mandirs.
Yeah.
So whoever this person is, with their name, should in public go out and say that Dalits should not be allowed in temples because of traditions. If they want, they should make new mandirs. That's exactly what Swami Karpatri wanted in Kashi. He tried to form a new Vishwanath mandir.
Can we say the story? Karpatri Maharaj ji, when he made that new temple, the new Kashi temple, because Dalits were allowed to enter the old and
The
original
traditional
Kashi
one, the
temple.
Prachin one.
You know, I'm so proud of the Hindu society.
Yes.
The new temple by Karpatri Maharaj was lock, stock, and barrel rejected.
It did not take off.
Totally.
It did not take off.
Totally.
What a proud moment for Hindu society. They defeated Karpatri Maharaj.
And which is why I'm saying exactly. So this idea of start new mandirs, that again presupposes it is somebody's mandir and not somebody else's mandir. So I refuse to concede that basis of the
So
argument.
you are saying that increase the locus of ownership.
Not increase. It has always been of all Hindus.
Okay.
It just needs to be changed. It's not even increasing it.
Okay.
It has always been of all Hindus.
I will accept caste-based discrimination of a temple if you can show me documentation going back to its establishment. तुम बोलते हो कि वो 4000 BC में establish हुआ था. Show me the documentation.
तेरे को एक जगह नहीं मिलेगी evidence.
I don't care. I will accept their argument if they show me documentation.
Okay.
On what basis was Ram Mandir built in Babri Masjid? Property rights.
Yeah.
We had the documentation going back centuries. ठीक है? I demand that. You say it is tradition, ठीक है, दिखाओ मेरे को. कागज दिखाओ. अरे ये सब बोलते हैं कागज नहीं दिखाएंगे, कागज नहीं दिखाएंगे. ये क्या कर रहे हैं? ये भी बोल रहे हैं कागज नहीं दिखाएंगे.
Then also it's duty and not right.
Yeah.
So then it cannot be selective.
Exactly.
It cannot be optional.
Okay. Next question is, there are many temples that don't allow men and sometimes women. If someone doesn't believe in the rules, why should they enter there?
I think we've already discussed the case of Sabarimala and Kamakhya very in detail. Sex is not the same as caste. I think both of us are in favor of menstruating women not being allowed to enter in Sabarimala Mandir if that is what the particular deity in that brahmachari form wants. But there is nothing about the deity in that mandir or any other mandir which says that only if my pandit is born in a particular jati will I be taken care of.
Will my tradition be sacrosanct?
In fact, even in Jagannath Puri in September of this year, the servitors, who by the way are of multiple jatis, not just Brahmin or other jatis, but they're not supposed to do any kind of intercaste marriage. One person had done an intercaste marriage and he entered the mandir. For the entire day, Bhagwan ko bhog nahi diya gaya, out of protest. फिर लोग श्रद्धा की बात करते हैं. You were ready to sacrifice the god's food in your protest. This happened in September 2023. People can Google it. So because one of the earlier servitors had done an intercaste marriage and he had been ostracized, he re-entered the mandir, and out of protest, the servitors refused to give food to the Bhagwan.
So secular.
So now tell me, Shraddha kahan pe hai, kahan pe nahi hai?
Okay, this is a really good question, Abhijit. One question is also, what about allegations of systemic casteism in any exam if most of the priests who qualify in turn out to be Brahmins or general category? Sometime limited reservations for SC, ST could help. It's a question, not a statement.
Can I answer that first? I fully
Yeah,
disagree. I disagree with that fully. I don't want any reservations whatsoever. I don't care if disproportionately most of the people are Brahmin or of any other jati. In fact, I'm convinced that for the longest period of time in large mandirs, most of them will be Brahmin by jati, and it's perfectly fine to me. So long as one or two people of different jatis can be priests, it shows the system is open and can gradually change. I don't want representative proportion in the priesthood. Let me be very clear about that. So long as other Hindus can become, see, let me say, historically, Baniyas have been doing business. So you can look at it, even today, many of the old houses are from either Hindu Baniya communities or their equivalent in Parsi or Muslim communities. But new age tech businesses, entrepreneurship has been much more democratized. So over time, it is changing. Same with the army, right? Historically, some communities have perhaps disproportionately gone to the armed forces. But people from all backgrounds are in the army and they make the ultimate sacrifice, they rise to the highest ranks. So it's not about jitni abadi utna haq. That's not the point. The point is the system open or not? If it is open, over time, it will gradually change.
Okay.
So I want two things to add to this. I'm still divided over it because my mind is still not made up on this issue. But there are two things which I definitely want. One is, at the very minimum, there has to be token representation to break any stereotype. Okay. Second, it may very well be Brahmins dominated, but the exam process has to be absolutely neutral.
Equal, absolutely.
Okay. You cannot ask the child where he is from, who his father is, what his caste is, whatever. If they come to the Gurukul, they have to be trained equally
सरनेम ही नहीं
irrespective.
रखो.
Surname ही नहीं रखो.
Well, I think we
And
can.
I don't know how that will be done, because in the olden days it was
नहीं तो
fine.
यार तो सरनेम से ही जात पता
Okay,
चलता थी इंडिया में.
let us not make the perfect the enemy of the good. Let
Yeah.
it be open. Let the gurukuls be open. Let the
Yeah.
mandirs be open. It's fine. There might be some discrimination, but it is better than saying no full stop.
Yeah.
So let people have
Which is
surnames.
why let's start with tokenism.
Yes.
If it doesn't pick up, because see, the most important thing out here is the whole of society has to feel incentivized in the protection of that temple.
See, one thing that Kushal we did not touch upon. See, the moment you de-link sampradaya or panth from jati, you will automatically have an expansionist mindset. Because right now, what is happening, everything is a defensive mindset to preserve this, because somehow you know that you have to constantly explain why this is. As opposed to it, the moment you de-link jati and sampradaya, you would want more and more believers. You would want more and more worshippers of that particular mandir, and there will be a healthy competition within the Hindu fold, and you will eventually end up growing and expanding within India and outside India as well.
Yeah.
So, but for that traditional link of exclusive almost of panth and jati has to be broken, at least conceptually. It doesn't mean they have to be forcibly removed. Just by this, one or two entries can change the understanding.
Okay. So next question is, oh my goodness. Chapter 4, words 13, 14 of Gita, Krishna says the creation of the Varnas are based on gunas and karma.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make caste birth-based? How?
No,
But again, don't they keep making a difference between jati and varna?
No, what I understand what the person is asking. 4.13. See, the issue is, even if karma obviously not, but people will connect it in a theodicy sense to earlier births. Even on guna, let us say there is some linkage on birth. It's both nature and nurture. Even within the nature component, I might have a different guna from my brother, and we both might have a different from our father, but similar to a grandfather. So even if something is intrinsically yours, it need not mean it is intrinsically hereditary within the family necessarily. See, Chandogya Upanishad has a reference that of the womb, which is why some people say that even Chandogya Upanishad, despite being Shruti or Shruti adjacent, it's not the Samhita, but whatever, it is not Smriti either, has the concept of birth-based Varna. But if you are born with a certain Varna, that does not necessarily. So birth, colloquially, it is important to say not birth-based, because otherwise there's too much discrimination. But if you want to technically understand it, birth is not the same as hereditary. I am born with something need not necessarily mean that my father also had it or my brother also has it.
For those who don't know, it is Chaturvarna Maya System Gunakarma Vibhagasya. That's all. The next is, okay, again, should we remove who have been appointed to take care of priesthood for centuries? There are a lot of other Dalit priests in Kula Devam temples.
Yes, they're saying in many smaller temples and many Dalit priests should they be removed, in many Kul Devi temples, etc. Nobody should be removed.
Okay.
Let us be very
It is
clear.
just what do we do in the future?
Yes.
What do we do going ahead?
Everybody's grandfather. Not one person is being removed.
Okay.
It's about for the future cohorts. When you have a fresh intake, do you allow it for everybody or not is the only question. So I just wanted to be very clear, because people will either with good intention or some people deliberately will misrepresent it. Nobody is being removed whatsoever. कि अब आपको भी एग्जाम देना पड़ेगा 40 साल बाद, ऐसा कुछ नहीं. It's only for the fresh intake.
Okay. Can you please break it down on how will it impact the smaller temples be different from the impact on bigger temples? How can one formula fit it all? I mean,
that's what we said.
Yeah,
there is no one formula that fit it all.
Worry.
What we're saying is there is a common minimum program where, so like, think of it this way. Again, let's go back to a Rahul Gandhiism. India is a union of states. Okay.
No, but this is what Anand doesn't understand. When Anand came on my podcast, I told, what kind of conceptual freedom are you talking about? Freedom should be to remain in the government and to get rid of the government, both, na?
Correct.
Anand said that is not freedom.
We can have multi-tiered processes.
Exactly.
It's fine.
If you want to be, so for example, the big, the Brihadishwara temple, which Rajaraja Chola built in Tanjore, the Tanjore big temple, it cannot sustain itself. You know that.
Tanjore.
ये लोग North Indians mostly देख रहे होंगे, they don't understand.
Trivandrum versus Thiruvananthapuram.
Yes, they don't understand superior Tamil language. You see, you people are very crude. I have to simplify my language for all you not you invaders.
Narthis.
So Narthis. So what happens is in Tanjore temple, it is in fact the local Chota temple which has so much revenue. It
Interesting.
supports the Brihadishwara
Oh,
temple.
wow. I didn't know that.
Okay, it is the power of the deity inside that makes the temple big or small or whatever. Number one. Number two, if you do not want to go, think of this as minimum support price, the farm laws that the government bought. तुमको अलग करना है, commercial farming में जाना है, जाओ. But we are also maintaining minimum support price if you want to stay. So stay.
Okay.
You know, Tirupati has all these, what they have, engineering colleges, no? Sri Venkateshwara College
yes.
and this and that. They are franchisee colleges here and there. You open up franchisee temples here and there so that you can support the local community and things like that. If you don't get support, you can go back to government control and get support out of taxes. You can look at the German tithe system for support. There are all kinds of things you can do. You know, in Germany, people don't realize this, but there is a tax on every person which goes direct to the church.
You can opt out. It's kind of
You can
libertarian
opt
thing,
out of, but then you don't get admission to the schools and things run by
of that particular
church.
Catholic or whatever.
Yeah. So, you know, these centers, remember, religion is also about education. You have a common minimum CBSE system, but you add the religious education specific to each temple that it teaches in its temple schools, where people going to those temples are prioritized for admission and things like that. Okay, these are all things that you need to do. There is so many things. This can be boss. This can be turned into a booming support system for Hindus. People don't realize this.
The
Right
options
now
are
we're
endless.
talking about reservation because it's a small, controlled, highly controlled part of education.
Yeah.
It opens up education in
If
many ways.
temples
and
are
things
freed,
like that.
I
The kind of
envisage a $1 trillion
resources that-
economy.
The kind of resources that can be invested.
I guarantee you, if you open up temples,
$1 trillion
but
economy.
understand, open up temples and end caste-based discrimination,
Yeah.
then it becomes a $1 trillion economy because it is market consolidation.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
The reason we went on losing for the last 1,000 years is de-urbanization. Before that, when did we ever till 1192? When did we not kick out invaders, boss? Shaka आए थे, ठीक है, 100 साल रहे, फिर we kicked them out, less than 100
We
years.
assimilated them, actually.
We assimilated or we kicked out. The Greeks we kicked out. The Greeks, some of them we assimilated, some we kicked out.
Actually, all roads lead to Jati Varna. Birth-based Jati Varna. Our societal problems, basically all roads lead to that.
Remember, they come entirely from de-urbanization. It is no longer a system that is suited to a re-urbanizing society. It is really that simple.
Either you can have a society-based kind of control, you can have polity-based control. So, as you were saying, some people were saying that Jati Varna helped us defend, remain Hindu. That is true. But we were conquered in the first place because the Jati Varna system prevented us some kind of consolidated state entity from repelling those attacks.
Yeah.
Once you are colonized, it helps you go insular, it helps you go rural, it helps you go more completely localized and basically below the radar. And therefore, almost an animal like of existence. But yes, you survived, the tradition survived. That is true. But the question remains, why were you colonized for centuries and centuries by so many different people? The Turks, the British, and so on and so forth. That is unanswered by this kind of defense of the Jati mapping to Varna system.
Yeah. Okay. This is a very good question, right? If a Purohit is a Brahmin, not all Brahmins visiting are allowed into the Garbhagriha. Shouldn't a distinction be drawn between Kartavya and Varna?
Absolutely. So long as it is applicable to equally to everybody and there's no birth-based thing.
I have to say, questions bahut achhe pooch rahe hain.
See, if somebody is allowed only because of a certain character or nature or the work he's doing, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that kind of discrimination. Discrimination is only wrong when it is on the basis of birth amongst Hindus.
Okay. One last question before we wrap it up. If Jitni Sankhya is implemented elsewhere, would it prevent these temples from reforming since general categories might feel cornered? How does one bridge this mistrust?
See, I think the question, if I'm getting it right, is if in government jobs, etc., the caste census happens and there are more aggressive affirmative action, how does then one do this? Because people are at least defensively keeping this as quote unquote theirs.
Yeah.
And there is a trust chasm.
I'm assuming
that's what
yeah.
See, my point is, again, let's not confuse cause and effect. Whatever we are seeing in terms of affirmative action is because of various errors that we've done as a society. Whatever wrong we've done, we can correct it based on our own principles and an old civilization.
Fair enough.
But it's not because of what has happened today. It has happened or what have happened earlier, even though in a very imperfect sort of way. Like SC/ST quota is very different qualitatively from an OBC quota and so on and so forth in terms of creamy layer and otherwise. But nonetheless, to say that if that becomes more aggressive, we will even furthermore defend casteism in Hindu mothers, to me makes no sense. If at all, it makes the proponents of the first move more vindicated. And let's remember, we always forget that this is the Modi government. It's important to mention that whenever we mention caste reservations, EWS has been introduced by the Modi government. It has been approved by the Supreme Court, and it is the first case in which the economically weaker sections amongst the residual classes, the general classes, have gotten affirmative action. So the first step has conceptually been done, that eventually the program can pivot from your social identity based on birth to economic need. For that pivot to happen over a generation or two, you needed this first step, the first step of being the EWS quota. Whatever other problems be there with that quota, first step, to Narendra Modi's credit, and the Supreme Court has now ratified it, is there, that conceptually we have finally said that income can also be a criteria, not just to exclude on the creamy layer, but to include even if you are born in a so-called general category.
So last somebody has said, what about Kedarnath and Badrinath kind of temples? The chief priests are Veerashaiwas from Karnataka and Malayali priests in so many cases. So what about them? Then how do those temples, if everything is freed, what is going to happen there? Status quo is maintained because they are anyways mixing.
Whoever are the priests will anyway remain the priests. No? So what will change? We're talking about the future in any case.
No, what if some temples are anyways following this?
See, I don't know whether they're specifically under the government control right now, but if the question is how will future priests be selected, then again, so long as there is no restriction based on birth, that's all.
That's it.
That doesn't mean existing priests go away.
Why? It's one thing you're being asked to compromise on birth. Can you do that? So then therein lies the problem.
So then my question is, if that's the case, who's the one who's holding up temple freedom?
Yeah.
There's no point saying the BJP is sold out. BJP has many ways of raising revenue. It need not raise revenue through
Only
temples.
thing being asked is let go of birth as a criteria.
That's it. There's really nothing else to it.
You say yes, kal mandir tumhara.
And unfortunately, some of the loudest temple activists are very clear on this, that they oppose it. So my point is then, once again, who are the ones who are preventing temple freedom? Ironically,
I am asking you like the Pandavas. 5 गांव दे दो, नहीं 5 गांव भी नहीं चाहिए.
Well said.
एक चीज चाहिए. Birth. Get rid of birth. Bus. You decide if you are going to be Duryodhana or if you are going to be Krishna.
Because if that is not compromised on, and these mandirs which are right now under government control, then I don't want them to see them denationalized if caste-based discrimination continues. But I want them to see them freed. So then the question is just of creating this consensus. I think this was not discussed in detail before. So I thank you a lot, Kushal, for organizing this. I thank Anand for earlier doing the space. We need to discuss this more. We need to write about this more, because I think we're all on the same page that it needs to revert to Hindus.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we go about it? Who will the trustees be? How will they be elected? How will they be selected or replaced? How will the priests be appointed or not? These are questions that we all have in mind. There's no point of putting them under the carpet in the name of being bullied on social media, because that has never stopped people like us from saying anything what we want. And that will never stop us in the future. So this thing has to be taken care of. Take the bull by the horns. It's just one small thing, as you mentioned, not even 5 villages. There's really nothing else. In any case, I can tell you the overall composition of the priesthood will not change for at least 30-40 years, if not longer. So this is simply a matter of zid, and agar koi aur zid hai to hum bhi ziddi hain. That's all.
Really very simple out here. Ki bhai, we did our end of Hinduism podcast. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Unless temples are given back to Hindus, Hinduism cannot survive. At the same time, without Hindutva, Hinduism cannot survive. Hindutva is based on eliminating caste differences. It is about creating a political Hindu who views Hinduism as over birth, over jati, over varna, over whatever. In order, it is a very easy syncretism that lends to both. The only thing you have to let go of is this birth. Notice, what is Hindutva? How is unity under Hindutva been achieved? By overcoming caste through social engineering. You want the same thing with temples. Temple privatization is imperative to the survival of Hinduism. Hindutva is equally imperative to the survival of Hinduism. A privatized temple that exacerbates birth-based divisions serves nobody.
One of the first things this government did in Jammu and Kashmir, one of the first things, maybe as late as early this year, after 370 was effectively abrogated, was introduce the incentives for intercaste marriages in Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory. For, of course, Hindus. For a non-SC Hindu marrying an SC Hindu, man or woman or vice versa. Imagine that kind of quote-unquote social engineering that Abhijit mentioned was now being done in Kashmir after Hindutva gained power to remove 370.
Yeah.
Whereas earlier, many of the Valmiki Hindus there were being treated, unfortunately, literally like shit. Many Punjabi and other Hindus from Jammu and across who had come here, they could vote in national elections, they could not vote in assembly elections. So they had kind of limited franchise in that sense. All these things were done based on Hindu consolidation, and anything that comes in the way should not be encouraged. Of course, with the caveat that no ritual whatsoever will ever be sacrificed. Only if there is a birth-based component to the who does the ritual, and that also an exclusive birth-based component. That is the only thing that is being discussed here. I want to be very clear. There is no homogeneity. People often say this is homogeneity. Homogeneity kaise bhai? You literally have thousands of gods. You have millions of gods or various permutation combinations, various local forms thereof. How can there be homogeneity in Hinduism in the same family? Somebody else is worshipping Ganesh, somebody else is a Krishna Bhakt, somebody is a Shiv Bhakt. There's no question. Hinduism by definition will be plural. So don't deliberately confuse people by saying that removing this caste-based criterion makes Hinduism homogeneous. No. In fact, it will make the various panth and sampradayas more colorful, more interesting, and more actually they'll be forced to think in terms of what our beliefs are, what we want to promote, as opposed to a default constituency based on jati being there. In this age when people are moving from one part of India to another, to say you must only go to your Gram Devi. My Gram Devi is in Mehem Rohtak in Haryana, but I was born in Calcutta. I now live in Mumbai, so I should have no say whatsoever in any Mumbai-based mandirs, even if I live here for the rest of my life. I should only connect to my mandir in Mehem Rohtak. I mean, this is the kind of weird arguments people say that, oh, you have a sampradaya or panth, you don't know about it. Once again, 70% Hindus do not identify with sampradaya or panth. So this argument that leave it to the sampradaya or panth is not connected to reality. You have to involve the broader Hindu society in some way or form. Of course, the rituals will be of that sampradaya and panth.
And let us be clear about it. There are also lots of grifters and freeloaders who are freeloading on all of this. And I'll tell you
You're
why.
giving the definition.
This is one second. This was a piece that I think it was Abhinav Prakash who wrote this. Excellent piece. I keep telling people to go back to it. Was it in the Hindustan Times?
Hindustan Times.
Yes.
How Savarkar won.
How Savarkar won. There have always been three streams within Hindutva. The most irrelevant stream which has never won an election, never won anything, was the Karpatri Maharaj types who are called the trads now. The other two were the progressives who were Savarkar, who wanted social change shoved down Hindu society's throat. And then there were the conservatives who were the RSS who said, Sab kuch samvad se hona chahiye, vivad se nahi hona chahiye.
We agree, but slowly.
Slowly. Let us create the groundwork for it.
Yeah.
And take the whole of society along with us. So here's the point. You can't get it on your terms. You take us along. You take the whole of society along. Or you don't get it. Full stop. Savarkar did not get his way. Karpatri Maharaj did not get his way. The RSS got its way.
True.
Savarkar won, but posthumously.
So
not in his lifetime.
Yeah.
So to give the definition, so I had said, who is a Hindutva free rider? A person who has nothing to do with the core principles of Hindutva. This person is just a run-of-the-mill bigot who sees Hindutva as the sine qua non of Indian political discourse and jumps ship and free rides on it. But deep down inside, this person disagrees with the core principles of Hindutva, which demand the dilution of caste or jati varna, whatever you want to call it, and creed-based ethnicities and a standard Indian identity. Standard Indian identity does not mean homogeneous Indian identity. So this person tries to ride the Hindutva wave and then adds the poison pill of bigotry towards different sects.
ये इतना बड़ा definition काय का पढ़ रहा है? Definition should be no
Scholarly
more than
आदमी
one.
है।
अच्छा,
मैं scholarly चीजें
लिखता
लिखता है।
नहीं,
तू
लेकिन
जलता है मेरे से। तू जलता है मेरे से।
चुप।
But the
मैं ब्राह्मण हूँ, मेरा definition right है, तू ब्राह्मण नहीं है, तेरा definition
नहीं।
right ही नहीं हो सकता है।
See, but I think the perfect way to end would be, there recently, a few days ago now, I had read an article by Arvind Datar on Ambedkar. It was a very good article, and I wanted to read a particular quote from that article. That article was called "Remember Ambedkar's Warning or the Warnings of Baba Saheb," and we'll end on that. Quote, Ambedkar expressed the view that castes are anti-national because they bring about separation in social life. They are also anti-national because they generate jealousy and antipathy between castes. Ambedkar's warnings must make us reconsider whether the present trend of having caste counting exercises or making subcategories within backward castes and scheduled castes to suit political gains are a step in the right direction. I think everybody needs to, as they say, calm down and understand that this caste thing is not helping Hindu society. If you really care for Hinduism, it's quite clear that sometimes, I don't know how to say this, but whom I like to now call the Hindutva free riders, they don't care for Hinduism.
Of course not.
They care for their jati.
They're not Hindu activists, they're Jati activists.
They are jati activists, and I think they should accept what
which is
they
fine. It's
They
okay
should
to be a
accept
Jati
what-
Which is,
activist.
I have no issues
Just-
with that.
Just
Yeah.
don't pretend.
And
But
if-
don't wrap it up to be some overarching this thing.
yeah, my problem is with people who couch their casteism, and what bothers me even more in many cases is that you want liberalism when it is applied, some things are applied on you personally, and you want hard line fascistic attitudes when you want others dealing with you on their life. You want fascistic rules.
The rules apply to thee, not to me.
So yeah, and on that note we'll end the podcast. So thank you to both of you, especially Harsh. तूने अकेले बड़ी गालियां खाई हैं इसमें, तो मैंने बोला मैं थोड़ा साथ में हम लोग एक स्विमिंग
अब
पूल
मैं भी गाली खा लेता हूँ.
हाँ.
So in nomine Patris Filii Spiritus Sancti absolvo te. We only declare our loyalty to Holy Father Church and Holy Mother Church, and we are peddling the church agenda. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we'll wrap it up. So go follow Abhijit, Harsh on
And
social
feel free
media.
to abuse us also. Just like the video,
Yeah.
and feel free to
Subscribe
abuse us.
the
Use
channel.
all kinds of galis for us, please. It helps the algorithm.
और हाँ भाई साहब, कमेंट करो, सब्सक्राइब करो, लाइक करो, और अगर हो सकता है तो ज्वाइन द मेंबरशिप प्रोग्राम, बाय द मर्च. इतना मैं घस के इतने अच्छे डिस्कशन करता हूँ.
शेयर भी करो. You can share it and say ये
Patreon.
इसकी तरह, ये कुशल की तरह, हर्ष की तरह, अभिजीत की तरह तुचिया मैंने देखा ही नहीं है करके शेयर करो. बट शेयर करो.
ओके, चलो, बाय बाय,
टाटा बाय.